It's me, Dax, also known as Nicole DeBoer. You are listening to Random Trek.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Random Trek. I am your fearless captain, Christopher Ingle, joined as always by my first officer, the man who has a sketchy past with a foreign militia, Commander Brennan, the Mystical Mar. Brennan, how we doing?
Bonjour.
I feel like Les Miserables at this point.
Yes, do you hear the people say?
Oh, yes. Today, we are taking a look at Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 11, The Darkness and the Light. A very Kira Nerys-centric episode.
Oh, yes.
You know, there are certain characters in Star Trek that I get really excited when we get more about their lives and backstories and cultures. Worf is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other, almost equally to me, is Kira Nerys.
Oh, yes.
Such a fascinating character. And this is all about that background that we've heard so much about in the past seasons.
Though I realize our lame news commentary may have been premature because there's another episode later in this season that really is a lame news episode.
Yeah. The Valjean. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Javert. Didn't even think of that reference, but yeah.
But this has similar vibes, yes.
It really does. In fact, it kind of reminded me of an Agatha Christie novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you don't know what's happening, why it's happening, the reason, and you don't know who the bad guy is until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really love the basic mystery plot of this, but what did you think going into this one?
Well, this is one that I thought I had seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I mean, I have a very, very, very distinct memory of being, let's see, this came out so I would have been 11 when this episode came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I recall actually watching parts of it on TV. Because I remember the climax.
Yeah.
That might have been the only part I saw, but I thought I had seen this episode all the way through, and then I went back, watched it, and went, oh, I have vague memories of this, but I don't think I ever saw it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, there's a reason I think that the end scene is so vividly imprinted on my mind. Because it actually is kind of horrifying. But we'll get there in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an episode that I've heard mentioned a lot. And I saw it and like, man, this is really good and really dark, and like Star Trek does, tackles those ethical questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really enjoy this overall, and the addition that she was that pregnant at the time, both in story and as an actress.
Mm-hmm.
Pregnant with, I believe, Alexander Siddig's
Yes.
child.
Yep. Believe it or not.
No, and it was, first of all, in this season, it is a great way to incorporate the pregnancy into the writing for the character.
Absolutely. I mean,
this
the
was
stuff
a
they do
brilliant
with
idea.
this.
It was, but
well, the whole thing with like Yoshi O'Brien and all that stuff. I mean, yes.
And you get to see Kira at her most vulnerable and at her strongest at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing. So let's get into this, kind of go through just the plot of it, and then we'll talk about some of the ideas that they're presenting in here and the ways they did it.
Oh, yeah.
So Kira, in the very beginning, is kind of saddened when she finds out that a former member of her resistance cell is murdered.
Yep.
And actually, we see this murder right off the bat.
Yeah, we do. It's a great opening.
Oh, it's fabulous. But her shock kind of turns to fear pretty quickly when she receives a message with a picture of her friend and a garbled voice singing, That's one. So Kira takes this as a threat and that all the members of her cell are at risk. And she's afraid that if she wasn't pregnant with Miles and Keiko's child, she might be able to protect her friends. So she's feeling very vulnerable right now.
Yeah.
And she has a great moment with Bashir where he's telling her, "Hey, I could help you out. Are you sleeping well? I'm doing okay. Are you taking your herbs?" They kind of don't help with the sleeping, and like there's this unease that she has. And the herbs actually, it's funny. The herbs have an important plot point later.
They
So
do actually, yes.
he advises her, take your herbs. Your herbs are important to help you metabolize better and good for the baby and all that stuff. Anyway, so Kira then makes arrangements. She receives a message from another friend named Fala, who is scared right now, who apparently is unrelated to any of this, but she's scared something's going to happen to her. So Kira makes arrangements for Worf and Dax to pick her up in a runabout as they're coming back to DS9. So they go to Bajor and go to beam her up, and it looks like a hunter probe got attached to her, and she's killed in the process of transporting.
And very, very gruesome death, actually.
Very reminiscent of Star Trek One.
Oh yeah, yes.
Really is like, and so in the process she's killed. Then Kira receives a message from the same scrambled voice going, "That's two." She begins working on the case with Odo, and she receives a message, "That's three," with the face of another friend, another member of her cell. This is really starting to freak her out. Two of her former comrades show up on Deep Space Nine, wanting to help Kira. They heard about what was happening and want to help Kira find the assassins. What's going on? Kira, of course, wants to handle the issues within the law, but she does allow her friends to stay with her in the O'Brien quarters. The O'Brien quarters are getting a little crowded, by the way.
Yeah, and these two friends of hers do not trust the law.
Right. And it's worth saying
they don't trust that the government could protect them.
It's worth saying that right now, while Keiko is away and Kira is that pregnant,
yeah,
she is staying in another room in Miles's and Keiko's quarters, just so they can help keep an eye. And I get that, so that's fine.
Yep, Auntie Nerys, as Molly calls her.
Yes. But she wants to handle it within the law. Her friends, that's not what they want to do, but they want to stay and help. During a staff meeting, Odo figures out that whoever's doing the killing must have a vendetta against the others and by connection against Kira specifically, and that she may be a likely target. And with the help of Nog, in a really good scene, I love seeing Nog use his lobes.
Oh, yes, and trust the lobes.
Trust the lobes. She finds out that the voice is a modification of her own voice. So she starts freaking out. Is it me? Is it someone? What is going on here? She really starts freaking out. But her friends in that moment are killed in an explosion in the O'Brien quarters. Kira ends up stealing a list of suspects from Odo's office and goes off to investigate on her own.
Even though she was told not to.
She was told not to. She ends up at the home of Silerin Prin, who is one of the suspects. Prin captures her and sedates her, or so he thinks.
Or at least she asks for that.
Right. It's also worth saying that her friends brought her fresh versions of those herbs that Bashir said to take. She did. And these herbs naturally counteract sedatives.
Yes. So this fellow, whose name I forget.
Silerin Prin.
Silerin Prin, you know, it's sort of the... It's kind of a horrifying scene. He's all scarred up, and so that's freaky enough.
Yeah. He's a Cardassian. He's a civilian, not military, civilian.
Then he reveals why he's angry.
So there was a bombing done by her cell. And now he is punishing those in the cell that were responsible for it. And he accuses Kira of killing indiscriminately, while right now he is only killing the guilty. He feels justified and vindicated for this.
Because a bunch of Cardassian servants were also killed.
Right. Now, she counters to him that Cardassians were hostile. They were occupying Bajor. And even if he was indirect and wasn't part of the military, he was still Cardassian. He was still part of this occupation.
Mm.
And therefore is a legitimate target. She's justifying again a common thing we will see with the Bajorans, justifying the murder and death of others.
Mm.
Prin tells Kira that he is going to spare the baby, but he is going to kill her. So he prepares to operate to take out the baby.
Eek.
Kira begs for a sedative. Here comes the sedative. He gives her the sedative, realizing the herbs are going to make it ineffective. She pretends to fall asleep and then surprises Siloran and attacks him and kills him. The DS9 crew show up to rescue her, but Prin is dead, and Kira, very shaken up, just wants to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the end of this episode.
Pretty dark.
But, the ending to me is one of the more powerful moments in here.
Yeah.
Because we've known with Kira that Kira's hot-headed.
Mm-hmm.
Kira feels justified in her feelings and does not feel that resisting in the way that she did was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She was protecting her people. She was trying to undo a wrong. But the question we ask here, which kind of leads down this deep, dark rabbit hole of a story, do the ends justify the means?
Mm.
Is Kira right for engaging in violent retribution against an occupying force? Or is Siloran wrong for wanting revenge for the death of what he views as innocent Cardassians?
Mm.
Or is he guilty simply for being Cardassian? And does that make Kira a little bit racist?
Mm.
Interesting ideas here.
Very deep. Yes.
So let's start with the two wrongs making a right.
Mm.
What do we think of Kira and her view that she is justified as a militia fighter?
Well, I think, when our friend Steve Morris was on the show with us, a couple of months ago, we were talking about how in World War II, it was not a war that could be solved by negotiations.
Mhm.
Hitler could not have been stopped by diplomacy. And we agree that, war is bad, but that was a situation where there was no choice. The enemy had to be stopped. And the problem is, even though most of us agree that that was completely justified, you always know in any conflict, no matter how justified, that innocent people are going to get killed. It's unavoidable. And
Mhm.
it's one of those where it's like, well, should we stop the war to save the innocent, or should we win the war to stop the aggressors?
I've been watching I've been going through the Arrowverse right
Ah,
now.
yes.
And in season 2, no, 3. I think it's season 3. Might be 4. Anyway, one of the mid seasons of Arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end, the character of Damien Dark, played by Neil McDonough,
Mm.
launches a nuclear missile and is going to
Ah,
destroy, standard bad guy fare. He manages to do this.
yes.
Well, Felicity, who is on Team Arrow,
Mm-hmm.
she hacks it and realizes that it's going towards a very populated city, and she cannot stop it. She cannot disable it, but she can
Mm.
redirect it.
Oh boy.
And she had no choice. It was either this large city that was going to be destroyed, or do I direct it to this smaller city to mitigate the damage?
Mm-hmm.
And she directed it to the smaller city to mitigate the damage. It's the trolley problem all over again.
Exactly.
Do I do I kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people to save millions of people? That still can't be an easy answer. It can't be that simple.
Yep.
But for Kira, it is that simple.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, like a lot of the great ethical debates in Star Trek, nobody's wrong and nobody's right.
Right.
Prin isn't wrong or right.
Mm-hmm.
Necessarily, Kira isn't wrong or right. I mean, we learned that Prin, he mopped the floor.
Yep.
He was a servant. He mopped the floor. That's what he did.
How appropriate does that make this? That this isn't a hardened killer. This isn't a general or something, or a spy. Just a simple man.
Yeah. I mean, and it's had years to sort of fester in his anger, but it's interesting because even though the Cardassians were the occupiers, not all of them were the ones committing uh,
Atrocities.
crimes against
Yeah.
humanity or Bajoranity, whatever you want to call it. Because
Right.
some of them were just pencil pushers, just people who were just like, I'm not a soldier, I'm not a politician, I'm just a servant who cleans the floor. It definitely presents a conundrum because we do see this, that I'm sure that there were plenty of moments in World War II where a bunch of innocent office workers got killed just because they happened to be in the same building with the true villains of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's one of those where there really is not an answer. And that's the great thing about Star Trek is sometimes there are no answers. And we
Right.
have to look at all sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this episode does a great job with that.
Now, in terms of the writing for this episode,
Hmm.
this is written by Brian Fuller and our popular Star Trek friend Ronald D. Moore.
Yes.
How do we feel about using, and I call it this very Agatha Christie style, to tell the story, a good old fashioned, honest to goodness murder mystery?
Mm.
How do we feel that plays to this, in keeping us going and not knowing where we're looking?
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can argue that the episode is split in two.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Agatha Christie murder mystery, and then you have this political thriller, moral conundrum ending. Um, it's one of those where it's kind of like, for me, it's hard to say if the two mesh. I mean, the end product is a great episode, but there might be a certain anticlimacticness to
Mm-hmm.
the discovery of Prin as the villain, but then it switches into this moral uh, discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting structure.
Right.
I don't know if it entirely works, but in the end, you come away going, okay, that was a pretty good episode.
Yeah, and I feel normally when I deal with a murder mystery, I
Hmm.
want an idea who our suspects are. I want to figure it out.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
want it just to be nobody that makes
Yeah.
no sense. Like it was the janitor down the street. Wait, when did he come in the story? What? But
Oh,
in this,
The Scooby Doo effect. Yes.
exactly. But at least in Scooby Doo, you always know it's always the person that's there, probably the first
It's
person they
always
talk
someone
to.
we met. Yeah.
Yeah, here we didn't get that, but
That's
that
true.
that
That's true.
adds to this theme even more of the innocents. The people that are affected during war are the
Whose
people
names
you
that
don't
we do
even
not
know.
know.
Exactly.
I mean, we all know the big names, but yeah, what about the average person whose name we don't know?
So I think this was an effective way to tell this kind of a story,
Mm.
and it didn't feel uh less than as a story. I was
I
in
had not thought about
play.
that. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. I
That
like it.
sometimes we like to focus on the big names,
Hmm.
but it's like that often it's the names that nobody remembers
Right.
that are affected the most.
Hmm. And to
It's
have a
like it's like, and not to be overly morbid, it's like when there's a school shooting or an act of terror.
right.
How often do we remember the killer's name more than the people who got killed?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is an example of kind of we don't know this guy, and that's important because he got injured and his friends got killed,
Hmm.
and nobody remembers their names.
Now, one of the cool things too that really helps, and he's not in it a lot, but this guy would play an important part down the line in Star Trek history. The man who plays Celerin Prin is Randy Oglesby.
Yes.
That's not a name you know, unless you're a Star Trek fan.
Oh, yes.
Not only was he in a previous episode, not the character, but the man, he would go on to play a very important part in the Xindi arc in Star Trek Enterprise
Oh,
as
yes.
Degra, the man who was designing and building the end of Earth. How interesting that he plays a character here that is a no name that was affected by war, moving to a man who is being manipulated to build a weapon to start a
Mm,
war.
yeah.
Really interesting in that. But I do really like his portrayal in both. And this is short and quick, but I really like him.
Yeah.
And you hardly even see him.
Yeah.
It's the faceless villain. I kind of like this in this case.
Hmm.
Really great. All right. And I learned a new rule of acquisition. Rule of acquisition number 111. Treat people in your debt like family. Exploit them.
Yes.
I think we should have a count every time a rule of acquisition is brought up.
Yes.
Oh, final thoughts on this episode.
This is a very good episode. It's very dark,
Hmm.
um, very disturbing. It certainly stuck in my head for a while.
Yeah.
But this is definitely one of the best examples on DS9 of examining the whole point of the show, which is picking up the pieces of the Cardassian occupation of Vador.
Hmm. Yeah. And overall, one of Kira Nerese's better focused episodes.
Hmm.
So great. Fabulous. All right. Well, next week is movie night here on the
Well,
ship.
actually, this week is
Oh,
Voyager.
that's right. This week is Voyager. Next week.
We're recording on Monday, so everything's
Yeah, yeah, we're a little off. I was trapped in the holodeck, uh,
yes,
performing a play for 2 weeks straight. We have to talk to engineering about why they couldn't get the doors open for 2 weeks. Can we do
yeah,
that? Anyway, we've never had a chief engineer on this ship, haven't we?
no, and that probably explains a lot.
Maybe it's like Defense Against the Dark Arts. We just get one and they die in the next episode. I don't know.
Yes.
Anyway, but yes, next week is Voyager. Then the following week is movie night. So for Voyager, let's open up the randomizer.
Hmm.
Here we go. Rule of morality. Turn, turn, turn. Okay. Season one,
Mm.
episode 14, Faces. This is the one where B'Elanna Torres is split into human and Klingon by the Vidians.
Mhm.
I
All
I
right.
remember this, but I haven't seen this one in a long time.
I don't think I've seen it all the way through. So,
I vaguely remember it, and it's an interesting idea. Because remember, B'Elanna is half Klingon, half human. And Vidians
Yep.
actually, for me, have always been one of the most fascinating species in Star Trek that we never got more information about. I
Mm-hmm.
really like that. But yeah, so face it, season one. See how well a season one of Voyager goes.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. All right, and then the following week to end the month, we're going to be taking a look at it's my birthday month. So I chose an 80s classic that I wanted to take a look at, and I chose a very special guest who has never seen this film, but I wanted to share it with her and have a little bonding moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the captain's daughter, his oldest, is going to join us. My daughter will be with us to review a movie she's never seen.
Ooh.
Flight of the Navigator, Disney's Flight of the Navigator.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and I'm hoping she understands how important Pee Wee Herman was in my life.
Oh boy.
Well, he was. I mean, as a kid, that time,
Mm-hmm.
that era. But yeah, that is where we are at. And then as we go into April, I think it's animation after that.
Indeed.
All right. But Brennan, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Renmar at Blue Sky dot however that formula goes. You can still find me on X at Running Mystical. You can find me, of course, on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify at Page Turners They Were Not.
You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at CIngle1984. And as always, we end every episode. Kapla! And live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.